what is their policy on defence? What is their policy on immigration? It's hard to find because subliminally, I think most people involved realise they will never need such policies because they have no chance whatsoever of ever being in power.
I mean, they're not going to win an election. They're very difficult in terms of getting a policy agenda together. I suppose, what do they actually want to do, these sort of disparate groups around here, other than...
Can I interject? They want to destroy Keir Starmer.
Hello and welcome to Spectator TV. I'm James Heale and I'm joined today by my colleague Max Jeffries and Paul Mason, the columnist for the New World magazine. Now, for this week's cover, Max, you've looked at this new fascinating alliance that's emerged between the kind of rump Corbynites and socialists and the so-called Gaza independents. How did this relationship come about? Is it just a marriage of convenience? And can they be a threat to Keir Starmer's ambitions of re-election in a few years' time?
To my mind, James, it began in November 2023, which was the ceasefire vote in Gaza, which is when Keir Starmer told his party not to vote for this SNP motion on a ceasefire. And I think it was probably at that point that a lot of Muslim people in Britain decided that they could no longer side with the Labour Party and looked elsewhere for alternative candidates in constituency elections in 2024. So you saw this in places such as Leicester South, where John Ashworth was standing. He was kind of assailed for not voting for a ceasefire in Gaza in that 2023 vote. And from there, then, that relationship has developed. So you saw then in Leicester South, the election of the so-called Gaza Independent in Blackburn, in Dewsbury, and in Birmingham Perry Barr. And so you've got these four so-called Gaza independents, obviously the re-election of Corbyn, Zahra Sultana, who has now joined your party with Corbyn and those four MPs to make what is now called your party for the moment. And I think it is a relationship that's going to last. I think it makes sense even outside of the Gaza war continuing, that ceasefire, whether it does or does not hold. I think a lot of Muslim voters in Britain no longer see themselves as siding with the Labour Party.
I mean, Paul, you'll be someone who's familiar with some of the characters involved in all of this. Who are the driving forces, and can they really sort of, given the issues we've seen on the left, and of course the left has a tendency to split traditionally and historically in whatever form it takes, can this actually really last and be a cohesive unit?
Well, the first thing to say is that the mass phenomenon that we're dealing with is, as you describe, a kind of switch off by some in the Muslim community from centrist politics. And a switch, it's not only Gaza that drives this. When we campaigned in Batley in the by-election, the status of the Al-Aqsa Mosque is something that's very close to the heart of many Muslim voters. So, long before Gaza, for example. I think it's unfortunate that we're seeing this development. I'm personally a Catholic and spent a lot of time in the northwest of England, as did many of my people in my generation, trying to desectarianize politics, trying to remove religion from politics. So you have got this switch off. But I would emphasise it's a section of the Muslim community in Batley, in some of the places you're talking about, Perry Barr, in places where Labour won, Shabana Mahmood's constituency, for example. Muslim community split. It hasn't completely gone over to what you might call Gaza independence. So that's the first thing to say. On the left side of it, we are dealing with something that I think I would just characterise as not a project for power. It can, if you're a left-wing socialist, it can feel very lonely. It can feel very brutal. Centrist politics, especially Labour centrist politics, and I think for people who are really enthused by Corbyn, and I was part of the Corbyn movement, although I have to say I wasn't particularly enthused by him. For people who that's their sort of golden age of politics, 2016 to 2019. What the Your Party represents is it's a reenactment group. It has no. If you notice. We may talk about some of their documents. 9/10 of the documents they're discussing in the party formation are organisational. There's barely any political statements there, let alone policies for power. I mean, what is their policy on defence? What is their policy on immigration? It's hard to find because subliminally, I think most people involved realise they will never need such policies because they have no chance whatsoever of ever being in power.
I mean, that's a great point there, Max. Can you flesh this out for us? I mean, what do they actually stand for? Obviously, it's easy to tell in some ways what they're sort of against, but what are they actually for? And where are the potential issues of conflict in terms of policy?
I completely agree with what Paul said. I mean, I was at the World Transform conference a couple of weeks ago, which is sort of a gathering of Britain's socialists, and I've never seen people as angry as in a meeting about your party democracy. And it was a panel, and they were shouting, people calling each other the comical alley of your party. And at the moment, I think Paul's completely right. That is totally what they're obsessed with, and actually, in some ways, for good reason, because in terms of the policies, they don't actually agree on a whole lot. The so-called Gaza independents, I mean, 2 of them are landlords. They all voted against putting VAT on private schools. They are absolutely not socialists. And then you've got Zahra Sultana, who would champion transgender rights, Corbyn in the same camp. In political terms, they are just a very unnatural fit.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, the Corbyn thing there is fascinating. And obviously he, I think, made a number of mistakes as leader of the Labour Party. Surely that potentially is sort of using him as the name is one thing, but actually comes with a lot of baggage. And frankly, a lot of people around Jeremy Corbyn and the project who may not actually work to the long-term advantage of any kind of sustainable political party.
The divisions of the left are kind of my mastermind specialist subject. And I don't want to bore the Spectator's listeners on this too much, but we have to realise that there are pretty severe differences between Corbyn and Sultana. And they're not just organisational, they're suing each other. One accused the other of fraud. And that for that reason, one side of it can't get hold of the membership data on the other side, even though they've got close to £1 million in the bank as a result of the launch. The first thing to say about Corbyn is that when he was Labour leader, there were guardrails. His politics are essentially sort of left social democratic pacifism with a historic sympathy, should we say, for the Warsaw Pact and its style of geopolitics. The so-called campism, where there's an anti-imperialist camp, and Western socialists are meant to sort of back it. That's Corbyn. But when he was Labour leader, people like me, people like Clive Lewis, people like Neil Griffith, the 2 successive shadow defence secretaries, were very successful in keeping Corbynism within a container called Labourism. So, Labour had a constitution, it had thousands of councillors with skin in the game, hundreds of MPs with skin in the game, and a constitution and a shared body of politics, that an instinct, a political style. If you're doing all this from scratch and all you've got are Corbyn, pacifist, sort of soft Stalinist, Sultana, whose politics I'll come to, but they're considerably harder, and some conservative Muslims with no guardrails whatsoever and no constitution agreed in advance, and indeed no limits to what can be said, no rules, you're going to get a fiasco. And people who think Corbynism 2.0 is going to be like the first thing are completely wrong, because Jeremy's biggest failing, above all the political mistakes he made, is he can be pushed around very easily by the people around him. He said, I've tweeted about this, one of his fans, a woman who was his fan but never met him, who tweeted about going up to him and saying, look, how are we going to sort this fiasco out? And he kind of sat in a corner and said, we'll think of something, we always do. Now, I've been in rooms with Jeremy Corbyn where that process, we think of something, happens. And we is not him. We is the people he surrounds himself with. So the Seamus Milnes, Carrie Murphy, the old, what we used to call Lotto, the leader of the opposition's office, James Schneider, they'll decide what the outcome is. And all these people in that room in the World Transform who think they have a share of voice, who think they're going to get a decision, they're not. They're not going to get any decision. The real challenge, however, is that even the minimally socialist, vague set of sort of, Richard Haldane once put it, a forest of Christmas trees with presents under each one, which is what their programme will look like if they ever draw one up. Even that then has to filter through 4 essentially conservative religious men. And I'm not sure it's going to.
I mean, that's the thing, Max, really. So, they're not going to win an election.
Mm-hmm.
They're very difficult in terms of getting a policy agenda together. I suppose, what do they actually want to do, these sort of disparate groups around here, other than...
Can I interject? They want to destroy Keir Starmer. That's what unites them.
Yeah.
Feel free to go on.
No. I was going to say that. Is it purely about revenge on Keir Starmer and destroying the Labour Party?
Yeah, I imagine some people are still dreamers who think that they can have some sort of electoral success. But I think a few others have made this different point, which is that maybe they think that they can do what Reform has done to the Conservatives, to the Labour Party, in changing the conversation.
A bit like UKIP on Europe.
Yeah, enforcing them to the left. I wonder if that's part of it. And I agree with what Paul said as well, that I think Corbyn is kind of being pushed into this in a way that I don't think he really even wants to lead your party. A lot of people around it are surprised that he's taken it this far. They think that it's people like Carrie Murphy who really just want another shot, another run at managing an organisation, and so have put him to the front of it. He doesn't want to be there. And so this whole thing is kind of trundling along with people who don't get on, people who don't want to lead it. But bizarrely, with this massive membership base, a lot of money in the bank account. As Paul said, there's actually a very strange scenario at the moment where some of the people who were part of your party set up the bank account for its funds, and then the funds were put into it, they say, without their permission, and they want to get rid of this bank account and pass it on to Corbyn and Sultana. But there's all sorts of legal wranglings about whether the mechanism through which they pass it on to them. So members' money is stuck in a bank account that certain people in the party have access to, but others don't. It's a total mess. And I agree with what Paul said. I think it will trundle along for now, but ultimately eat itself.
It's even worse than that. Just for clarity, it's even worse than that. Because one side has accused the other of fraud, when the money is transferred, that is, and because both are operating through limited companies registered at Companies House and therefore subject to companies law, if one side has the assets, i.e. the money, and it transfers them to the other, the question is, do the liabilities transfer? And that liability may indeed be a criminal liability arising from I didn't accuse anybody of fraud, they accused them of fraud. So that's what, if one side accuses the other of fraud and then assumes the assets of the other side, then my learned friends are going to have a field day, aren't they, with this. But I think we should also come to some of the. I mean, I'm not writing. Although I say it's not a project for power, it could do a lot of damage to Labour, and it can do a lot of damage to British democracy, because we're insouciantly injecting religion into politics. And I just think, as I say, as a kind of lapsed Catholic and experienced in northwestern sectarian politics, the rival walking days that we used to hold in the 1960s, I just would caution everybody about that. The other thing is, Zahra Sultana, unlike Corbyn, Corbyn has been absolutely clear that he refuses to use the term anti-Zionist. Sultana is insisting that this party is an anti-Zionist party. That means no Zionist Jews can join it. Good luck explaining that to the EHRC.
Yeah.
It also means that as you know, while anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, a lot of anti-Semitism is currently expressed as anti-Zionism. And if you look at what's happening on, say, the campus of City University, where a professor is being physically hounded for having once served in the Israeli Defense Force, if that kind of behavior starts to be associated with people who are wearing a badge or carrying a membership card of a political party, then again, it's a fast track to the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And I'm not certain anybody at the top of your party has actually thought this through, maybe except the people who had to deal with it under Corbynism, James Schneider et al., who was playing whack-a-mole with really vicious anti-Semites inside Labour, expelling them, and Corbyn, to give him his due, expelled hundreds of anti-Semites. How are they going to expel them now? On what grounds? Because they'll just stand up and say, I'm sorry, I'm just an anti-Zionist.
I mean, that's the issue. I mean, isn't it, Max? Is that, we can talk about the kind of potential energy here. And as you say, it can be expressed in different ways. People can vote for, say, independence. But getting a kind of coordinated party with all the legal entities involved, it doesn't seem there isn't sort of person there sort of masterminding all of this, having the institutional knowledge. And that's really potentially going to trip them up in one way for Labour to maybe get one over on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you contrast them to the Greens, who at the moment have Zach Polanski, who seems to be on a very good run as far as the voters he's appealing to. He looks very put together. He's come out of a conference quite strong. And he actually, even when I was at an event with him and Zahra Sultana, he kind of teasingly said to her, you should come and join the Greens. They're polling higher and higher. And I think just looking at the contrast of the two, I think if you're a voter who is done with the Labour Party and wants to go somewhere further to the left, you're going to look at these two entities. And I think ultimately, aside from the appeal of Corbyn and Sultana, you will look to Zelensky and Mothin Ali, who's his deputy, a Muslim man, and think maybe that's the place for me.
I mean, Paul, obviously that's the sort of great thing in this conversation, is it, the unspoken thing, which is that ultimately Polanski's playing your party splits very well, very tactically, not getting involved and really just surging with, as Max says there, the existing infrastructure and also a really good campaign and social media team as well.
Yes, and I think what I say there is that the bigger threat to Labour is from Greens, from Plaid Cymru in Wales, as we're about to see with the Senedd election, and still the SNP in Scotland, despite all their mess-ups and screw-ups, are polling very strongly because Labour isn't. I think that the answer for Keir Starmer is not just delivery, but it's making government relevant. And what I mean by this is, first of all, I even think this is about reform as well, although they're leading the polls. The moment the UK electorate sees the response of financial markets to the possibility of a non-centrist government, they will get a very salutary lesson. We currently bond yields are 4.5%, and that they've fallen down from close to 5% because there's risk aversion due to people thinking there's going to be an AI crash on Wall Street. So 4.5% is still not ideal. Okay, I would say, and I've seen, city voices who are beginning to research this. The prospect of a Farage government would take it to 8%. The prospect of any kind of green Your Party government you'd be in Weimar Republic territory. You'd be looking at double-digit interest rates on government debt, and as soon as that happens, which will happen way before any election, by the way. The question that will be put to Zach Polanski and Nigel Farage, and if she's lucky, Zahra Sultana, is, well, what are you going to do about this? Are you going to default on Britain's debts? What are you going to? There's no amount of nationalising things, tax cuts, border control. None of that solves the problem that you and the instability you're injecting into the system is now potentially raising the spectre of default for the UK. So when Joe Blow down the pub, or Joanna Blow gets wind of this, I think we're going to see a rectification. And that's why I think both the Conservatives and Labour and the Lib Dems aren't panicking and shouldn't panic about this kind of sudden flight to the extremes. They've just got to make the idea of politics relevant to people so that they stop signalling their values by polling in favour of unelectable parties.
I mean, Max, obviously, talking up the dangers of a kind of economic crisis on the level of 2008 or worse is one thing. What are Labour planning to do over the next couple of years or so before that election, before the imminent prospect of power, in order to kind of bring home and sort of take the fight to these guys?
I think what some in government are particularly worried about is a repeat of what happened in 2024 in certain constituencies. The independent candidates have always denied that they had anything to do with this, but the Labour candidates in constituencies such as Leicester South had a really horrid time. Jonathan Ashworth, he's spoken before about having to seek kind of refuge in a vicarage after being hounded by a group of men for the way he voted in that ceasefire vote in November 2023. And so I think we'll probably see some movement on that, especially after the synagogue attacks in Manchester. Lord Wolney submitted a long time ago a series of a kind of dossier to Yvette Cooper immediately after the election, saying this is how we can stop this from happening again. That, it seems, was basically ignored. But I think in Shaban Mahmood, in Steve Reed, who's the new community secretary, I think there'll probably be a bit more action on that. And so it's always very tough to go too deep into the connections between the campaign of intimidation that Labour candidates faced and the Gaza independence. But I think some in government think that there are supporters of those campaigners who were involved in intimidating Labour candidates. And I think there will be a crackdown of that in some shape in the coming months, whether it's in the form of an anti-Semitism strategy or a counter-extremism strategy from the Home Office.
Well, we look forward to covering that here on Spectator TV. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Max. And thank you very much for watching.